And today we are so excited to have Ryan Glatt with us. He's the author and developer of the Brain Health Trainer certification. And he is, as mentioned, is joining us from the beautiful Santa Monica, California on the Pacific Coast. Ryan is a personal trainer, health coach with a strong background in exercise science and human health. And he develops curriculum for the health and fitness industry on health neuroscience and coaching individuals towards optimal brain health. Ryan has completed programs from the Amen Clinic, the Neuro Coaching Institute, the Neuroscience Academy, the Neuro Leadership Institute, Neuroscience for Coaches, and others on the topic of brain health, sleep, and mindfulness. He's currently enrolled in the Masters of Applied Neuroscience program at the King's College of London, and that's London, England, not London, Ontario. Actively consults for brain-based technology companies like SmartFit and assists in operating a brain health center within the Pacific Neuroscience Institute in Santa Monica, where he practices brain-based fitness and brain health coaching. So welcome, Ryan. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks, Heather. You have a great voice. You should do audiobooks.
Oh, thank you. So my husband Hugh and I, we met Ryan last year at the Functional Aging Summit in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was the first time we met. We spent about an hour chatting with you. And at the time, you were just almost finished your course, and you were telling us all about it. We were so excited. We're so excited to have it on our website and have you speaking here today on the topic of brain health and exercise. So I'll let you take that away, Ryan. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And thanks all for being here. This will be recorded, I believe, for future reference and use, just in case some of you need to step away or have missed it. And once again, looking forward to sharing this information with you today. So quick background, I don't need to spend too much time on this, but I have a passion for neuroscience. I've been in the fitness industry for 10 years and have been through mostly the corrective exercise route, started in generalized personal training for 24-hour fitness when I was 18. Now I'm 28, late 28. And with the beard, I look like I'm 29. So really taking advantage of the quarantine here. Almost done with the master's in applied neuroscience. And my mission is to join the fitness industry and neuroscience research fields, as well as the practical ones together. Because as I'll present here, the biggest problems facing the world are of the mind and the brain. And exercise is at the very top of recommendations that can help with all of those things. So I really do see our industry, that being the health and fitness industry, and that scope expanding to include health coaching, alternative healthcare providers, allied healthcare professionals, to be able to really address these problems. Specifically, I work with older adults, but I've worked with all sorts of different populations in this context. This is a graphic to show you the exponentially climbing rates of dementia across the world. So North America having the second most incidences of dementia. You look at these larger numbers by 2050, for instance, and they're quite large, the highest being in Asia and Oceania. And so 2030, 15.8 million in the Americas, and then 30 million by 2050. Many of those are in the United States. Of course, I'm not going to get too much into the methodology of epidemiology here of what might be causing this, but it's part aging population, it's part people living longer, it's part other comorbidities and diseases. And then of course there is a wild rate of undiagnosis happening as well. So regardless, with these projections, these are quite discouraging and concerning numbers. And so this is probably the biggest problem in which we want to try to help. Now, these are US statistics, but can the fitness industry actually make an impact? So once again, the United States statistic from 2019, there's about 5.8 million people living with dementia, approximately 400,000 trainers. In 2018, it was about 356. So that's about a 15 or 16 to 1 ratio. So if every personal trainer in the United States was to take on one of these individuals, you could take on about 15 people to reach about 5.8 million people. Now, that is 5.8 million people with dementia. We could say it's a similar number for those with mild cognitive impairment or those experiencing thinking declines. But certainly, I'm not saying that all of you should be training people with dementia. I'm just trying to illustrate a convenient statistic that if everyone was brain-minded, sort of pun intended, that we'd actually be able to make a significant dent especially because the World Health Organization does state exercise as the best tool we will have for those with cognitive decline and to slow cognitive impairments here. So here are some Canadian dementia statistics. There's about 564,000 people currently living with dementia. 937,000 will have dementia in 15 years, so that's almost double the rates. 1.1 million people in Canada are affected directly or indirectly. That includes caregiving, friends, family. And so even though many people say, oh, I'm not going to have dementia, it will affect you directly. And so I think it's important to state this, that even if it's not with dementia, we could just say cognitive impairments. While I couldn't find in time very specific statistics on mild cognitive impairment, I'm sure we easily could. I was just a little bit last minute with some of these. Or the amounts of people complaining of thinking declines. And that could be anyone from as early as 30 to 50 years old complaining of thinking declines. This is just dementia. So this number grows as we include mild cognitive impairment or thinking declines. But I think it's pretty crazy to think how over 1 million people will be affected directly or indirectly by dementia. And there's a 10.4 billion cost in Canada annually of those caring for those living with dementia. So pretty significant statistics here. And Hugh, you shared a nice little stat in the chat here. 500,000 in Canada with dementia in the next 15 years, over 1 million. Okay, I see. Okay, so we got the same stats there. That's encouraging. So what are the different stages of cognitive decline? So there's different stages. One, there's normal cognitive aging, in which there are normal cognitive changes associated with aging. There's subjective cognitive impairment, which is essentially I feel a change in my cognition, but it's not something that's diagnosable. And then there's mild cognitive impairment, which is I feel a change, I notice a change, and others probably notice a change in my cognition, whether it be memory or attention. And that is diagnosable. And then we have dementia. And there's a lot of different types of dementia, Alzheimer's disease being the most popular one in terms of recognition and diagnosis and prevalence, but there are many different kinds. Now let's talk about something called cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is like a brain's gas tank. And so if we are going to delay dementia as much as possible, in this hypothesis, a higher cognitive reserve will help us do that. So as indicated by the chart here, you'll see that a high cognitive reserve, and we'll talk about what goes into that in just a second, delays the onset of dementia much more than a lower cognitive reserve. Okay, so what goes into this? Well, one is modifiable health factors. That includes stress management, sleep, exercise, and diet. It includes level of education, so stay in school. It includes social support, which is incredibly important, especially during these times of social isolation. It includes positive affect, so good mood, and we'd probably be safe in assuming that things like dementia and depression, dementia, and anxiety all affect cognitive reserve. So anything that is a mental illness or mental health condition, even if it's not diagnosed, even if you're just feeling low affect or negative affect, will affect cognitive reserve. Then we have stimulating activities and novel experiences. So this is new things that are important for improving cognitive reserve. And then cognitive training, and we'll define what that means, but essentially cognitive stimulation. Cognitive training specifically, you might think of brain games like Sudoku or brain training apps like Brain HQ. And while that does play a role, I think what we're talking about is cognitive demands. And some people may get that from work. Some people may get that from the novel activities they're doing. Some people might get it from going to a museum. And there is a difference between, say, a brain training app and cognitive stimulation, which might be going to the museum or attending a concert of classical music, for instance. What I think the opportunity is specifically for fitness professionals is taking one modifiable health factor like exercise, combining it with social support, positive affect or enjoyment of that modality, having that modality have an aspect of novelty and stimulation, and then having aspects of cognitive challenges. We think that is going to provide the most significant dosage of benefit to your cognitive reserve. And so we'll visit that later here. Oh, and of course what does cognitive reserve actually lead to? Improved cognition, therefore behavior and activities of daily living, quality of life, etc. Okay. So you've probably heard of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. And this is the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. Now, as you age, this is available to you. It's more sensitive in early childhood and earlier adulthood. And you see that as you age, the amount of change that is required goes up. So if you are working with the aging population or you are part of the aging population, yes, neuroplasticity is available to you with more effort. So walking programs are better for brain health than no walking at all, but we might want more effort, both physically and cognitively, in order to stimulate the greatest amount of beneficial change. So I'm giving some American guidelines here, but I think these are pretty recognized internationally. But what are the general recommendations for brain health? So the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, second edition, states that for substantial health benefits, including cognition in the most recent iteration, adults should do about 150 minutes of 300 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise or equivalent. Now, there's additional benefits for neuromotor training, which includes coordinative demands, and even these cognitive demands, although they don't go into that level of detail. Strength training offers additional benefits, and more minutes of exercise offers additional benefits. But how can we take this prescription even further for brain health, assuming that's not enough? Well, multi-domain exercise programs can slow the progression of cognitive decline more so than shorter and or single modality programs. So multi-domain, meaning instead of just aerobic, maybe aerobic and resistance. And maybe instead of just aerobic and resistance, aerobic, resistance, and neuromotor, which we'll define. And then on top of that, there was a massive review study by one of my mentors, Dr. Joyce Gomez-Osman, where her and her team did a big review of a bunch of different studies specifically for older adults, showing that 52 hours of exercise, regardless of modality, led to improvements in executive functions, the brain's CEO, planning, organizing, reaction time, etc., and processing speed in older adults. Once again, regardless of modality. So what this shows is if we can try to hit all three of these, let's have at least 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous. Yes, aerobic is important, so is strength, so is neuromotor, therefore justifying the multi-domain, and try to hit minimum 52 hours. That's just the minimum to see those significant benefits in certain aspects of cognition. That could be spread out over one, not one, but 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. That depends on the person's willingness, motivation, resources, budget, all sorts of different things. But 52 hours seems to be what you need to hit there. There's, of course, additional benefits for more hours there. So let's talk about what are the benefits of exercise on the brain, generally speaking. So exercise can affect the brain at 3 levels. The first is the behavioral level. There is improvements in mood and cognition, thinking abilities, and affect, if you will, as we defined earlier. Then we have the micro level. The micro level includes changes at neurons, vessels, and growth factors. So neurons are brain cells. Vessels, like brain vessels or capillaries that are scattered throughout the brain, which has a rich capillary network. Then we have growth factors, which can be molecules, proteins, hormones that basically signal the brain or aspects of it to grow in different ways. This can be angiogenesis, the creation of new blood vessels. This can be neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons. It can also trigger growth at a higher volume, or it can trigger growth in terms of behavior, which would be things like cognition. Then, of course, as alluded to at the macro level, we can see improvements in structural levels of the brain, i.e. brain activity and volumetric changes. So that could mean that the brain grows in a certain region, like the hippocampus. So the hippocampus is related to learning and memory, and research has shown that it grows in response to exercise. But it can also be a change in functional connectivity. Let's pretend no aspect of the brain actually changes size, but it actually improves in its function, similar to how with an exercise program, you may see probably an improvement in the first 2 to 3 weeks of strength, but without seeing muscle growth. So in a similar way, we might have neural functional adaptations to exercise. And you may, depending on the age and the condition and the prescription, we may not see an improvement in brain regions, but we may slow the deterioration of certain brain volumes. So these are 3 levels, the micro, macro, and behavioral, that exercise can affect the brain. So let's go over functional and structural neuroplasticity. So we know the brain's able to change. We know it can change on different levels. Let's talk about the micro level. At the structural level, there would be neurogenesis, meaning there's actually change in neurons. At the functional level, we have new synapses, which are the connections between neurons and are further facilitated by skills and experiences. Those can be strengthened or they can be weakened depending on your experiences and behavior. How long does this take? Well, synaptic modification takes milliseconds, and the significance is variable, but there are significant acute effects that are beneficial of exercise. Of course, we want those things to stick. The structural aspect of this, the branching of synapses and dendrites, takes several hours, and new brain cells can take several days. Networks of brain cells can take several weeks and months. And then higher level brain changes, which is what we're after, can take several months and years. Of course, these are not exclusive. You can have neurons very early, within a day. You can have higher level brain changes, such as hippocampal volumes, which have been demonstrated as early as 4 weeks. But we are looking for more significant sustainable changes. Here's an image showing the hippocampus of runners and controls. And you'll see the runners, as indicated by the black dots and the other images and the branching here, that there are more neurons, connections, and sprouting in those with higher levels of cardiovascular fitness. And then this image is very encouraging. The red regions show areas of gray matter, which is a tissue type in the brain, a very thin layer that's kind of over the whole top of the cerebrum. And what's happening here with this review study is it looked at all these other studies asking how many studies have shown which parts of the brain are affected by exercise in terms of gray matter. All those red regions are those areas. So the amount that physical activity can affect the brain is about 80% of the brain's gray matter regions. That's a lot. And so you really have a lot of power as an exercise professional to help stimulate these changes. So what's wrong with the basic exercise prescription for brain health? Well, we talked about the 150 minutes, adding the 52 hours, adding the multimodal component here. What we want to do is go beyond that. So we talked about neuromotor training, and I'm going to expand upon that a little bit. Let's talk about the cognitive demands, also recollecting that cognitive training seems to contribute to cognitive reserve. So Dr. Adele Diamond, the godmother of executive function, states that we want to go simply beyond moving to moving with thought. And I think that is very well said. So most exercise activities, including those that have been researched to show significant benefits on brain health, require little thought. Let's think about cardio machines, basic weight machines, brisk walking. These are helpful, but perhaps not enough. So if you can space out, that is an activity that requires little thought. So why do people have TVs in gyms? Because if you're on an exercise machine, you can focus on that. But if you played tennis or you did a martial art, you can't watch TV. You can't do that. If you did, you probably wouldn't do very well, or you'd risk some injury. Now, that doesn't mean the exercise activities that require little thought are bad. It's more of a yes and conversation as opposed to an either or conversation. However, in some instances, cognitively engaging exercise appears to have a stronger effect in some cognitive domains than non-cognitively engaging exercise. This is mostly shown in children and in older adults, probably because of the greater sensitivity to neuroplasticity. And then exercises that train and challenge diverse executive functions like dance, sports, and martial arts are likely to include these challenges. So what can we learn from these? And I think what we can take is that we're not supposed to be rep counters as fitness professionals. We're also supposed to be skill teachers. And of course, exercise that brings joy, pride, and confidence, i.e. a balance of challenge and skill, not frustration and not boredom, is likely to have the greatest effect, as there is an intimate connection between mood and cognition. So let's talk about a couple different brain regions here. The first one we have is the hippocampus. And this is an area of the brain that is responsible for learning, memory, and emotion. And its decline in size and function is attributed to age-related memory issues. Increases in size occur with general physical activity and aerobic exercise. There have been some interesting studies saying, okay, well, types of exercise that don't really stimulate or require cognitive load may not affect this area as much, although it's challenging to separate because some of those things like tennis still get the heart rate up. And with that, there may be an interesting relationship of the hippocampus to lower extremities. So there's been some research correlating the volume and function of the hippocampus to things like rhythmic stepping or locomotion. So really interesting as it relates to gait assessment, and it would be really cool to demonstrate a stronger relationship there in the future. So larger volumes in the hippocampus in one study did equal larger stride time. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so the effects of resistance training on the brain. Structural and functional improvements in the frontal lobe, which is this area of our brain that does make us unique from other mammals. Lower white matter atrophy and lesions. It includes improvements in executive functions, the CEO of the brain. We can thank Dr. Teresa Lute Ambrose for being part of this research. She's out of Vancouver. Strong Canadian research here. So it's interesting that resistance training and aerobic training both benefit the brain significantly, but seem to do so in unique ways. Now, I took this conversation a little bit further, and as a part of the Brain Health Trainer course, which I'll present at the end of this conversation, or this presentation rather, that there are a lot of different types of exercise. And they probably, and this is based off probably 80 plus articles that I've looked at, and I wanted to create an infographic that sort of represented some of these changes. What's interesting is that these different types of exercise seem to uniquely impact different aspects of brain function and brain structure. And so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because it is a bit of a busy graphic, but cognitively demanding activities, open skill activities, resistance training, mind-body exercise like yoga, tai chi, qigong, all seem to affect many regions of the brain, but are more likely to emphasize, if they're more of a volume knob, this frontal lobe, whether it be executive functions, gray matter, more efficient brain activity. Those are different types of adaptations. Gray matter is structural. Improved executive functions is cognitive or behavioral. More efficient brain activity is also macro level, but because it's one area, might be more of a micro level change. And we know that the brain activity can change more faster or faster than, say, executive functions, which can probably change faster than gray matter or structural changes, although they seem to be dependent on each other to a degree. For the parietal lobe, which integrates sensory information, this makes sense that object-based or visuospatial or sensory-rich activities are more likely to stimulate the function and structure of this area. In a similar fashion, the occipital lobe, responsible for visuospatial demands, motor control and attention, things that require the vision. There was a study showing that masters athletes, compared to sedentary controls, had a greater structure and volume of this area, the occipital lobe, than those that were not exercising, probably because it's a use it or lose it scenario. The cerebellum, which houses 50% of one of the brain's types of neurons, the Purkinje cells, is responsible and stimulated during coordinative exercise, skill in motor learning, and open skill activities. Now you may say, well, Ryan, that had to do with some of the frontal lobe as well, and that's true, especially because the thalamus connects the cerebellum to the frontal lobe through the cerebellar thalamic frontal pathway. It's a mouthful. The temporal lobes, which include the hippocampus, seem to be affected by cardiovascular exercise and general physical activity like walking or steps, as there's been some correlation studies there. Now, this is not a final answer, and there's probably a lot of weaknesses and inaccuracies with this model. In fact, I will say there is, but it's a conceptual model that attempts to convey the value of multiple types of exercise, therefore potentially justifying a multi-domain approach. Now let's talk about this in the context of skills. There's open skills and closed skills. Open skills, the environment's constantly changing, movements have to be continually adapted, and they predominantly are externally paced, like sports, dance, or martial arts, for instance. With closed skills, they're more stable, predictable, movements have a clear beginning and end, and the performer knows what to do and when, like exercise machines. And so most of the fitness industry is contributing to closed skills, which are good for brain health and helpful for a lot of things. But this essential nutrient of open skills, not just for brain health, but for musculoskeletal health and generalized neurological health, is usually missing. And yes, it's great that we adopt these activities, but especially for special populations might be challenging. And so what I encourage us as an industry is to look at skill learning as an opportunity for us to incorporate that as part of our programs. These are the cognitive phases of motor, or the 3 phases of motor learning. The first one being cognitive. So as we introduce new skills, there's a lot of cognitive demand. The working memory demand, or the short-term demand associated with that, as well as attentional demand, is very high. So there's a lot of acquisition of new information, trial and error, lots of learning involved here. That's why it's called the cognitive phase. So when we introduce a new skill, this might be why new skills are helpful for cognitive reserve. There's a lot of cognitive resources attributed to that. Then as we learn that skill, it becomes more associative, and we are kind of smoothing that out, if you will, in some ways. We're refining our focus, we're eliminating mistakes. And then there's more autonomous, where you don't have to think about it as much. Now, in terms of brain health, I think the cognitive and associative phase are what we're after. And if we're looking to teach skills in a cognitively demanding way, this might be a justification or framework for introducing new skills. And so I think this is the potential weakness of routine, is that with routine, you've probably learned these skills, and therefore that routine may have lost some of its direct cognitive challenge. It doesn't mean it won't have benefits on cognition or brain health, it will. But I think the opportunity here is to introduce new demands and new skills in order to increase the cognitive load. In addition, if we're trying to promote autonomy or mastery, we'd want to keep going from cognitive to autonomous. And this is where we probably could empathize that too many novel skills or too challenging skills might promote too much frustration. So here's an exercise and physical activity plan for attention. If I want to improve someone's attention, this is pulled from my course here. We might say, okay, let's use a multi-component training program. We talked about the benefit of that. And let's say we do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Let's say we have 3 components: aerobic training, or AT, resistance training, or RT, and balance, because let's say this individual has Parkinson's disease. That contributes to about 60 minutes, and let's say it's a moderate intensity. Then let's do Tai Chi Tuesday and Saturday. Saturdays at home, Tuesdays in a group, 30 minutes to 60 if you wanted to, low intensity, because it's a mind-body exercise. Thursday and Sunday, let's say we take a skill-based dance like salsa or ballroom, and we do about 30 to 60 minutes of that, low to moderate intensity. Now you may say, well, not everyone's this dedicated, right? Even I don't do this program. Well, there's a 2-day version, a 1-day version, a 3-day version, a 4-day version. I just wanted to show you that if we took the 150 minutes, it would probably just be Monday, Wednesday, Friday aerobic exercise. But as we take the more brain health oriented guests, educated guests, it probably looks something like this if you're going to do 7 days a week. Now, this is more feasible for someone that's motivated to prevent cognitive decline, which many people are. It's a massive fear. And I have seen people that have been completely sedentary have one conversation with me about this type of stuff and then adhere to this type of program. So fear-based motivation, while we want to avoid leveraging that, is very powerful. And we already know that with these statistics that we explored early on in this presentation, many people are fearful. So it goes to show that you may say, well, people will never do this. Well, in my experience coaching older adults that maybe don't have the best experience or a lot of experience with exercise are actually may be the better population to adhere to this type of program. Now, I'm not saying this program everyone should follow. This is just an example. Now, why might we want to incorporate cognitive demands? We have a question here, I think. Yes. Okay. So why might we want to incorporate cognitive demands into our exercise programs? Well, it's mostly because of this evolutionary neurobiological basis. So when we were evolving, which I don't really remember. I don't know if any of you do, but I think it was around when we had VHS tapes, but probably a little bit earlier. So we had to use our spatial memory and navigation systems. We had to use our motor control and learning systems to manipulate spheres, tools, objects. The spatial memory was to memorize and understand the environment. And we had to use our sensory and attention systems through our eyes, ears, proprioception. And we had to manipulate our speed demands. So slower speeds for the crouching, hunting, gathering, moderate speeds for the longer distance running that you've probably read about being associated with evolution. And then faster speeds like sprinting for really getting that prey, right? Sort of the final hour of where you exhaust the prey and then you sprint and kill that prey. And then the executive functioning demands where we don't know where that prey is going. Therefore, we need to problem solve and be flexible and plan. And so you see when we look at something like hunting, this is a very cognitively and physically demanding modality. But not only that, it involves low, moderate, and high processing speed or intensity demands. And there's a lot of variability there. Not all hunting situations look alike. Or if we have one hunting session, it changes throughout that entire thing. And so this was presented by Dr. David Reichland, who recently wrote an article for Scientific American about exercise in the brain, but also justified why exercise with cognitive demands might be beneficial. Okay. So let's break this down a little bit. Certainly we can talk about areas of skill demand like sport, dance, martial art, all of those, even theater, have physical and cognitive demands that research has shown is beneficial. However, if we wanted to integrate this in a more artificial and or targeted way, how might we do that in our exercise sessions? So to simplify this, and it's not simple, but to put a system to this, if you will, we can have the luxury of breaking down 4 primary cognitive domains. The first one being attention. And attention including attending to visual and or auditory stimuli in a sustained, keeping that singular focus, selective, keeping a focus while ignoring other irrelevant stimuli, say in a crowded environment, switching from task to task, or dividing the task, i.e. dual tasking or multitasking. Then we have processing speed demands, things like less complex bottom-up reactions that are present really in all tasks but measured by time to completion. Now, processing speed does decline with age normally. Certain types of attention also decline with age, specifically selective and divided attention and switching, attention switching. Then we have executive functions, which sit at home in the frontal lobe there. More complex top-down functions that includes controlling your impulses, being flexible to unexpected circumstances, planning things, and organizing things. That is affected by age as well as other chronic conditions. And then most popularly, memory, the encoding, storage, and retrieval of verbal, visual, and or procedural information. Now, working memory, short-term memory, is actually a part of executive functions where you're keeping names, faces, phone numbers in your temporary memory storage. And it's also what's most closely attributed to skill learning. However, there's different types of memory affected by different types of stimulus and exercise. And we won't break that down too much right now. But those are the 4 domains. And it's helpful to look at them like volume knobs and not light switches. So as we explore different cognitive demands where someone might say, well, I'll just do dance and I'll be fine. And that may be true. But if we want to be more of the era of precision medicine, where certain individuals have specific cognitive needs or desires or goals. For me, it might be attention because of my ADHD. If for someone with dementia, it might be procedural memory. For someone with, or episodic memory. For someone with Parkinson's, it might be attention. For someone with a chronic condition like a cardiovascular condition, it might be executive function or memory. For an athlete, it might be processing speed. For a 65-year-old who has no specific cognitive complaints, they just feel like they've slowed down, it might be processing speed. So and cognition works in an integrated manner. They don't work separately, even though, ironically, we're separating them here. So they work as volume knobs, and you want to be, as a skill teacher, you also want to be a cognitive DJ to sort of turn these up and down based on their demands and their abilities. So I'm going to show you a drill pulled from the Brain Health Trainer course that really looks at executive functioning demands. It's more of a complex drill. Hopefully it makes sense in the context of what we presented so far. Usually we present very simple drills: throwing a ball, catching a ball, having hands behind your back, picking left and right, responding to directions, adding, switching out left and right for red and blue. But I'm going to kind of throw you in the black hole here and show you a complex drill that we use very simple equipment for. So let's play this drill here.
I'm going to switch up the numbers for you. Okay, so now this is 3, this is 2, and this is 1. Very good. Okay, and instead of saying the numbers, I'm going to say the colors, and then you're going to have to match those up. So if I say pink, what do? Very good. Awesome. If I say green,
no.
That's right. Very good. Okay. And if I say yellow, good. So scale of 1 to 10, how cognitively demanding?
Really hard.
Okay. All right. We're going to move pretty fast. Okay. I think it's difficult, but I think you can do it.
Okay.
Right. Are you ready? I'm going to give you a string of colors here.
Okay.
Yellow, green, yellow, pink.
No, I started wrong.
That's okay. I'm going to give you a different stream of colors. Are you ready?
No. Okay.
Pink, yellow, green. Good. Awesome job.
Okay, so probably not the best drill to start with. However, the reason I wanted to show you that drill is because that was preceded by a bunch of easier drills. So just like physical demands, we want to progress and regress appropriately. Same goes for cognitive. So at first, we just introduced the movements. Then we introduced the numbers, and we used the numbers. It just so happens that those dots were also colors that then she had to correlate with the numbers that then she had to correlate with the movement. So lots of switching and correlating and working memory short term. And then on top of that, I gave her a stream. So instead of just saying green and her taking time to respond to that, I gave her a stream of colors. So all of those formats, all of those steps have been preceded before giving her the more complex demand. I just like to show that one because it goes, whoa, that's how demanding exercise and cognitive training can be. And yes, it can be that demanding. Now, for a majority of your population, it's going to start with something easier and should be accommodated by fun. So you literally heard her say, no, I'm not. She was just in that cognitive phase of motor learning for that particular drill. And that's okay. We developed rapport. I could push her a little bit. There was a little bit of comfort being uncomfortable. She had already experienced drills that were too easy, so she was ready for that challenge. And notice that we didn't start until she had gotten the gist of it. And so that was a drill pulled from the course. It doesn't come till later in the course. It's preceded by easier drills. And there's about 2 hours worth of drills in the course. Now, in terms of technology, so in the course, we really focus on low to no equipment and low to no budget ways of doing cognitive motor training. We really want to democratize this. But I think with the times now, it's very helpful to usher in technology. Let's start with talking about some apps that are incorporating dual tasking. So one of them is SWITCHEDON, which I'll show you a video for, and it allows you to select colors and or arrows and or numbers that could be displayed in any fashion. You can't touch the screen or you don't have to touch it at all. It can record reaction time. It's very helpful for athletes, but we're also customizing it for the use of special populations and older adults. So instead of visually or auditorily communicating that with equipment like I did in the video, you can leverage technology for doing this. And right now, this is a free app. You can search SWITCHEDON. I think it's one word. Excellent app. And I'll show you a quick video of how it's used in fitness. This is also called Clock Yourself, and Clock Yourself was developed by a physiotherapist from Australia, Meg Lowry, and Clock Yourself takes advantage of this clock step that many of you are probably familiar with. You know, forward is 12, behind you is 6, that type of thing. And so she leverages this with steps and or hand motions at varying difficulty levels. And then you can substitute the clock with a calendar or a number or a math equation, and it can become more cognitively demanding. Nimble is an app mostly looking at fall prevention. Dual tasking is a fall prevention measure because when you're distracted, that's when more postural instability comes out, and it's more real world to be distracted, and most people fall when they're distracted, kind of going somewhere, not paying attention. And so they use trivia in this example while they're doing an exercise, mostly geared towards fall prevention once again. So I'll show you a video of Switched On here. I'll turn on the sound, it's just some music. And these drills might look too challenging for the special population, but are helpful in the context of getting some ideas around general fitness and using this app. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend starting with those things, but nice ideas where you take very recognizable traditional fitness movements used for the more functional population that could be very easily physically and or cognitively adapted to any population. So that's just an example. Other technology that's equipment-based includes SmartFit, which is one of probably my favorite technology, which has, this is a large board called their Pro Trainer, which is excellent for group training. And also comes in single panels where it can slide up and down, or a single tall panel, even individual targets where you can kind of spread them around a little bit and have them talk to other systems. And they have a variety, a plethora, if you will, of cognitive stimuli, colors, numbers, letters, and lots of different brain games that allow you to simultaneously conduct physical and cognitive tasks. They're also creating assessments. There's ways of tracking progress. So this is what we have in our brain fitness clinic in the Pacific Brain Health Center, if you will. This is one of our primary technologies for group and one-on-one training. There's also FitLight, which is more of a reaction-based training solution, primarily used with athletes, but very flexible individual targets that have a proximity sensor. I've used this technology quite a bit. Virtual reality is a tremendously opportune area that we actually have. This is Seth Rogen at a Move for Minds event at Equinox put on by Maria Shriver. And he's playing a game called Zenjoy, Zenjoi, and he's wearing a headset with a camera on the front that recognizes his hands. And this is actually developed for someone with Alzheimer's disease. The creator, his name is Jacob, his mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and he couldn't really find a good way to give consistent and I guess properly progressed or regressed cognitive training. And she had trouble when with individuals with dementia, some of their initiation might be an issue. So asking her to walk faster to get to that proper level of intensity was challenging. So he created this virtual reality system where you're getting cognitive stimulation. You have a blue hand and a red hand, and you're collecting gems, and it gets progressively more challenging while pedaling, and the RPMs are tracked, so you can look at the trade-off if you slow down in one or the other. They actually just released this for a home unit that combines a virtual home unit called the Oculus Quest, which is about a $400 headset with a bike and a sensor, and you can actually do this at home now. So I just did it last night. It is amazing, even for me. So it doesn't have to just be for older adults. Then there's another thing called NeuroTracker, which looks at multiple object tracking, which you can get on any device. You can sign your clinic up for it or your practice up for it and have people underneath you track their data, plan training sessions. This is especially applicable to driving performance in special populations, whereby you have to track multiple objects at one time, say follow 3 balls at one given time that go more and more, go faster and faster as time goes on. So these technologies aside, we wanted to create a really standardized education and create an example of if we were to talk about exercise in the brain, the basics of neuroscience, how to combine these cognitive physical drills, how to create an exercise plan for brain health. There really wasn't a course in which to do that. And so I created this brain health trainer course a couple years ago to have interactive graphics, lots of neuroscience theory, turnkey programming in the course. It's picked up by some of the most amazing organizations, including MedeXN. And we're happy to work with all those organizations. We try to really give the best possible shot at health neuroscience specific to exercise as possible here. Some of the other organizations that it's approved by are ACE, American College of Sports Medicine, NASM, National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches, and also CanFit Pro. Let's see here. So thank you so much for attending the presentation. These are interesting times, and one, we've had a lot of people sign up for the course because they have the time or interest. But I would like to say that a lot of people are out of work or struggling with work right now. And I think that partially has to do with not diversifying the service line. I know that some of it's out of our control, but I've been just as busy, and a lot of other brain health trainers that have gone through the course have had a very easier time transitioning, knowing that the people that need this information, if they're experiencing thinking declines or have a neurological condition like Parkinson's or mild cognitive impairment, it's more essential that they exercise than it is to lose weight, for instance. So brain health as a value proposition is more imminent and necessary than usually what is presented in the fitness industry, i.e. knee pain or aesthetics, all those things being important and even related to brain health. But what we find is that individuals that rely on brain health as a value proposition, those people that have focused on that as their business have not been affected as strongly, and in fact have increased their business to some degree. So happy to take on Q&A. Heather, did you want to come on to, oh yes, and you can go to MedeXN, MEDEXN.com and use that code there as well. It can work on either site. So Heather, did you want to come on and ask any questions or wrap up here?
Absolutely. So for anybody that has a question for Ryan, if you put your cursor at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A, and you can actually click on that and then put in your question. So that was really amazing. And full disclosure, I'm actually taking the course right now myself. And one of the things I really enjoy about it is a really interactive course. So maybe you can tell people a little bit about the format of the course, Ryan?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've taken tons of courses. And so there's several things I didn't appreciate about those courses. For example, having 1 hour webinars and having 6 of those and calling it a course was challenging, and the quality wasn't really there. Just me as a learner, I couldn't really take in all that information with my attention span and the way the course was structured. And so I feel there's been some laziness with how the fitness industry and health industry as a whole structures their online e-learning. And so I really went out of my way in terms of time and cost to make an interactive course that has a really rich multimedia experience, and having it be chunked up into small sections so you can pace yourself and have small bits of information at a time. So there's a neuroscience to learning, and I worked with someone who has his master's degree in instructional design, which is a neuroscience informed field of how people learn best, especially online. And so the course reflects that, where it's scrolling graphics, animated explainer videos. You can click on different regions of the brain and go in and learn its function and how exercise affects that region. There's all sorts of interactive charts and graphics. And so we're actually going through the process of improving a lot of what has been requested from our first year. So we're adding more videos, more explainer videos, even though we don't have a ton of text, a lot of that text is getting converted to animated explainer videos right now. We're updating it with recent research. So there's a lot going on with that course, but it's a nice, rich multimedia experience.
Oh, and I absolutely agree, because I've been just loving it. The other thing is that we started talking about the fact that, this course, or the conception of this course, was for cognitive function. And a lot of people think about that for the older population, but as you were going through the presentation, there's a lot of application to other age groups. So you could have somebody that's younger that has ADHD. You could have athletes improving their performance. You mentioned Parkinson's. There's lots of different applications. And also, I'm a cancer exercise specialist. So one of the reasons that I was taking it was because of clients that have chemo brain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at the Pacific Brain Health Center, we have a lot of different types of patients. We have people that just want to prevent cognitive decline, sort of the worried well, if you will. Mm-hmm. We have people that have noticed changes. We have people with mild cognitive impairment. We have people with different types of dementia. Parkinson's disease, MS, stroke, traumatic brain injury, cancer survivors of all sorts of different kinds. We have a wide population, and I'm using this approach, whether it's a multimodal brain health program,
Right.
and or dual tasking or cognitive physical training exercises for all of those populations. So it's a pretty interesting thing to apply this. And there is research at varying levels of significance and presence with all of those populations. And when I started working with this approach, it was primarily in kids with autism spectrum disorder, kids on the spectrum, kids with traumatic brain injury, ADHD, learning difficulties. So both in children and older adults and special populations, this is highly applicable, but even in athletes. So I appreciate that context there.
We do have a question.
Yeah, I see it there. Julianne, yes, there are. I don't know for the entire course if there's a screen reader, but I know for a fact that my instructional designer has the technical capabilities to allow screen reading, and there's a lot of audio in there as well. So if you emailed me directly or contacted MedeXN directly, I'd be happy to accommodate. I can't promise that all of it has a screen reader, but I know we have the capability. So that's good feedback, and perhaps in our update, which will happen in 1 or 2 weeks, we can have more of those features.
So again, thank you so much, Ryan, for your time. I know I always learn every time I speak with you. You're amazing, and I'm really enjoying the course, and I'm excited to get through it. And so thank you very much, and thank you to everybody that tuned in today, and hope to see you next week for the next webinar. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.